Konnichiwa. Welcome to the Marshall Maze. I'm without my partner in crime, Barakulat Shidoshi, but I do have a guest who's doing me a solid by being on. She's a licensed clinical therapist, and I have the privilege of working and kind of editing and in the back of the scenes her show, which is the Shrinking Heads podcast. And this is none other than I don't know if I can use your full name. I'm just going to say Elizabeth because that's what we do for the show. And she's a licensed clinical therapist. And say hello to the folks in the Marshall Maze.
Hello, Marshall Maze. So it is such a pleasure to be here. I have very much enjoyed listening to the Marshall Maze. So it's quite an honor to finally be on the show myself. And just as a little bit about why I'm on the show today, as a licensed clinical social worker, you might be going, well, what do you know about martial arts, or, what could you possibly bring? But I am a prior military therapist. I am licensed in a couple of different states, and I have a little bit of knowledge when it comes to the violence associated with martial arts and the violence associated specifically kind of with MMA, and the ideas of how that impacts the fighters, the participants, and some of those long-term effects of exposure to violence, both the physical and emotional, on individuals' mental health. And that's a bit about what we're going to talk about today, right?
Yes, absolutely. We can just keep this flow going because that was nice. I couldn't have pictured any better myself. All right, so Tadapa, oops. Well, there, Freudian slip.
I love that. Just rename me. It's cool.
So today's topic is about mental health and violence. And I've always felt, we've tried doing things in the past, but not having someone licensed who can talk in ways that myself and Barakulat Shidoshi, we would probably find ourselves struggling or falling short and really falling back on our lived life experiences. Where in your particular case, in your chosen profession, one of the main reasons that really intrigued me to have this conversation with you and have you on the show and to be on your show was you actually work like with folks that are kind of in I don't want you to give away anybody's personal business, but you've actually been in the trenches, if you will, where folks that have actually had real issues and struggling with violence and substance abuse and things like that. And that's unfortunately in our industry, that is still a thing where we're still running into guys that are running really hot and getting themselves and putting themselves in bad positions. But talk to us a little bit more about that part of your field, if you will.
So it is, I do work with a lot of first responders and a lot of prior military who have had some martial arts training, whether it be through like modern army combatives or, the Marine Corps equivalency, that is escaping me with those letters. But there's an acronym for everything, right? And it's a lot of looking at what have those experiences been? What have you seen? What have you done? But also the physical impact that has had on a person, because if we're going to assess somebody's mental health, we also kind of have to assess what are the physical things that are playing into your mental health, what is impacting that as well. And so this becomes this whole big kind of ball of wax when we talk about the sort of symptoms of long-term exposure to violence, whether that be, a decreased impulse control, much faster to anger and be violent in situations where people previously wouldn't have been violent, increased anxiety, stress responses, things like that. It's all of those, but it's also looking at what has happened to the brain physically. And that's kind of pretty fascinating too, is looking at the repetitive injuries to the brain, being hit in the head multiple times, being knocked out multiple times. What does that look like? And like when we talk about boxers and things, you've heard the term punch drunk, I'm sure. I can't imagine.
Yes.
That's actually a non-clinical term for some mental health and physical health stuff that come together to form that that whole kind of the slurred speech, the impulse control, the lack of balance, sort of the difficulties with cognition and stuff. That's a really good example of the coming together of the physical and the mental health symptoms. So I see all kinds of stuff like that within my practice, and even just before I became a licensed clinical social worker, when I was a medic at the Army Combative School on Fort Benning, for a minute. And so just seeing some of the physical stuff with guys that had gotten whacked in the head during drills and things like that, and the long-term effects of some of the instructors, how their kind of personalities changed. So, I mean, I've been looking at this and experiencing it for a bunch of years now.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, there's and again, you said it way better than I could have. I mean, I could have struggled with articulating it in that way, but it's still one of those things that's pretty awesome. Well, because that's, we talk about the physical trauma that one goes through and the way the body gets hurt and broken down, and then what always typically gets missed in our field or as martial artists is the part of you that has to reconcile acts of violence, right? Like just whether you're a victim or in some cases in the martial universe, unfortunately, there have been those that have been aggressors. You know what I'm saying? That have committed crimes, and whether it be sexual abuse, whether it be we see this a little more with some of the MMA guys, unfortunately, domestic violence. Between the training, running hot, getting quick to anger, getting yourself. I was talking about this with a student when I did my little air quotation stint in cage fighting way back in the day. Not as impressive as I'd want to make it sound, but because it really wasn't. It was one of those things that somebody said, "Hey, you'd never do this," and then I said, "Okay," then I went and did a thing. But my biggest thing I struggled with was getting myself hyped up to go hurt someone. Like it's the weirdest thing. Like I never thought I would. I've dealt with real fights in real life, right? Where things that have happened and just boom and dealt with that kind of stressor. But getting myself to a place where I would intentionally want to break your arm, intentionally want to, and not be mad at you. Not having an actual problem with you. You know what I'm saying? Outside of, well, you're a fighter, I'm a fighter, and we're just gonna do a thing.
Well, our brains are not specifically designed to respond in that way. That response that you have, that activation of your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight,
Hmm.
that you get when you're in a fight, that adrenaline rush where you're like, all right, I'm going to go do the damn thing. I'm going to defend myself. You have that hype. That's a survival skill. That's your body saying, okay, this is a threat. I need to eliminate the threat. But it's a lot different when you're kind of walking into a cage or a match where that's not a threat, that your body's not perceiving that person on the mat as an immediate threat. So it really does take a lot of reprogramming just your body's natural responses. And unfortunately, that when you reprogram like that, it reprograms it in a lot of different ways too. And it's not necessarily just related to the mat. When you make it that much easier to turn on that aggression switch, you're making it that much easier to flip that switch competitive, like when you're competing, walking into the ring, walking into a match, things like that. But also when the dude steals your parking spot at the grocery store, that you've trained your body to respond in this way with that elevated aggression.
Ooh, that's you know what? Huh. So I go to a dog park, and it's gonna sound like I'm going off topic, but I'm not. And because I have my dog Tony, and a gentleman at the dog park it said, and you just made me think of this. He says, because we're talking about boxer pointer mixes, and of course when I'm with Tony, he's an automatic pit bull when people see him, and
Mm-hmm.
he was talking about how if you from day one the dog is loved, you have it around people, you have it around kids. That's that the way you raise it, boom, and then if you let it fight and then train it to fight or just like to respond to those kind of things. And now what makes it relevant to what we're talking about is I'm starting to liken both things together. I'm starting to see like there's because we are still, I mean, we like to pretend that we're not a part of nature, but we are, right?
Yeah.
We're still animals, we're still part of nature. And Wow, that makes a lot of sense to me right now. Like what you're saying, it's resonating because I'm like, okay, now that makes sense. And maybe that may be in a way of explaining why certain individuals don't respond well in the real world when they start training themselves to do that kind of thing, and maybe that's why we're seeing such a spike in unfortunately in MMA, where guys getting themselves into trouble. I haven't been to an MMA event yet where a fight in the crowd doesn't break out. I'm like, I'm trying to think. I'm like, like that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, well, and there's a whole other component to it too, you know. So we have like this whole behavioral modification piece that goes on with the fighters who have to amp themselves up and kind of hype themselves to get into this very aggressive mindset, especially when it comes to like MMA, where you're really just being scored on aggression. So if you're not getting that knockout, you're going to win that match because you demonstrated more efficient aggression. And so like that's you gotta amp yourself to that level, but also it's this other whole other component of it too, I think that we should probably have a brief little chat about, which is the normalizing of violence.
Yeah,
And
let's segue. Hey, I'm the king of segue,
yeah.
so let's do it.
So, but the repeated exposure to something
Hmm.
normalizes it in your brain. It ceases to be this like shock and awe thing where you're like, oh my God, that guy just punched somebody and like knocked him out. If you're seeing that over and over again, it just becomes a pattern for you. Like a learned behavior. Think about anything that you have seen, like the first time you saw it and you were like, what is that? You know?
Yeah.
And then you see it over and over and over again. Like where I live, people run red lights like nobody's business. The first time I saw someone blow through a red light like it was not their red light, and I was like, what is this? And it was such a shock. Now I give extra time at a red light just so that because I anticipate someone running it, it's become natural for me. Same thing with violence and same thing with watching, fights. I think that's part of why you have so many fights in the crowds at like MMA matches is because people have seen so much violence. They see the people that they're idolizing doing this and they're like, oh, I want to be that tough guy too, and it
Mhm.
becomes much more natural for them. They've seen it all the time. It's no longer such a shocking thing.
Yeah, no, no. I know there's some folk out there that are thinking in the back of, oh, what there they go, they're attacking MMA. It's not just MMA, ladies and gentlemen.
It
We're
is
just talking
not.
violence. We're talking about violence and being trained. Because we're not, so I, myself, Haskins Sensei, and there's so many others in my network, in my universe, besides Brock, actually, there's just Blackhawk. There's a handful of people that I spend a lot of time. Jermaine Adams, I got to a little shout out his way. I was talking to him earlier today. And we're, we constantly almost always are always reevaluating and just kind of just thinking about a trained martial artist, ladies and gentlemen, isn't the same as a dragon society, isn't the same as the guy you meet just walking down the street. A trained martial artist can typically do more than the average person, and
Mhm.
we do this by design. We're supposed to be able to take on three or four people and change the odds dramatically. You know, understand what I'm saying? And we turn our bodies in a way into living weapons. And especially if you're from the more air quotations traditional arts, where you're making your like you watch those guys, they got the two knuckles right here, and they're like big old hard things, and they're
Oh yeah.
punching. And they're breaking center blocks, and I get it, center blocks don't hit back, but you ain't hitting somebody with that without you crushing a man, and so your body's this weapon, right? And like with a firearm, I always say is I'm not careless with my firearm, right? Especially
Hmm.
now where I live now, I'm a constitutional carry state, so everybody's got a gun. And
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm more conscious now, right? I pay more
Yeah.
attention. I pay more attention even when I'm walking around and stuff. And yeah, I'm a trained martial artist and I do a thing. But what I realize is that I have a dangerous weapon on me at all times, and in my mind, if you're a fan of the show and listen to the last episode, last week's episode, I'm not really plugging it, but I'm making a statement, is that when we think martial arts now, we always think of sport. We don't really think of me killing another human being, right? We're not taking it like a modern army combat, like Mr. Larson.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? You know, where it's no, we gonna kill somebody. Like we
Yeah.
doing a thing.
And that's the entire, the thing is that there's so many different flavors of martial arts. Like Tai Chi is going to be vastly different, and how it impacts the body is going to, in the mind is going to be vastly different versus modern army combatives or some like jujitsu, things like that. In modern army combatives, the entire idea is to close the gap, become the aggressor, and take control of the situation so that you are the one that, you
Yeah.
know, you come out as the victor. You're the one that
Yes.
is still alive at the end of the
Alive.
end. Exactly.
Yes.
Same thing. I did a short stint years ago doing Krav Maga, and that's the same idea: is closing the gap, controlling the fight, being the aggressor, and to the point of death if that's what it takes to keep you alive.
Mm.
And I think we definitely do lose sight of that. We do have the idea of, oh, it's just a match, we're just scoring for points. But no, traditional training really does bring you into that headspace where up until killing a person.
Yeah. Well, and it's really it's such a thin line where that can instantly slip. There have been plenty of folks that have gone from a self protection, self defense scenario and end up in jail. Which like I'll tell you isn't really effective self protection at that point if you end up in jail. But it ends up in jail because they took it too far. They went from the perceived threat was it was already done. He was asleep. And you
Yep,
still
escalation of
yeah,
force has to
yes,
match the threat.
yes.
And I think, if you're putting someone in a space where they're so amped all the time and their response to violence is to be as aggressive as humanly possible, that's what you've trained the brain to do. So when
Mm.
you get into these other situations, you get into that bar fight with the dude who smacked your girlfriend's ass, or, you get into an altercation that's generally wouldn't have to have that level of aggression. Your body's just trained. You kick into this automatic pattern of behavior, and it becomes really, really hard to dial it back and stop before you get to 100 because you've trained your body to get to 100.
The Marshall Maze presents Route to the Truth and Paths Through the Maze. These standalone episodes are a deep dive into the martial arts industry. Both series are brought to you by the creators of the Marshall Maze podcast, and the Marshall Maze presents Modern Combatives. New episodes drop bi-weekly on YouTube, so you don't want to miss out. That's the Route to the Truth and Paths Through the Maze on YouTube or where you listen to your favorite podcast.
And no, so we've kind of covered like two types of violence, right? Or
Mhm.
yeah, two types of mental health issues. One of which is done physically from getting punched, right? I'm just trying to keep it. Again, if you're a fan of the show, without Barakulat Shidoshi, I tend to go everywhere all at once. But I've actually started keeping notes, and I'm really, ladies and gentlemen, really trying to be better. Um,
Oh, I'm not the influence for you on that one. If
I
anybody's listening to Shrinking Heads, we go on wild tangential adventures. But
It's such a great show. And now here comes the segue. It's such a great show. I really enjoy doing the edits for the show, and I'm learning so much about mental health. I got to tell you, and so thank you once again for agreeing to be on
my
and have me
pleasure.
on your show and stuff like that. Because again, it's we just don't spend enough time with it. We're all caught up in the physical, and we typically forget completely about the mental and the mental state that one has to be in. And so again, so now that's the segue, bringing us back. So we've covered two things. So right now we've covered something that happens from physical abuse, right?
Mhm.
Getting you hit in the head, punch drunk, and then we're also talking about being able to bring myself there to a really aggressive state. Now, I kind of want to dip into because where martial artists find themselves in a lot of issues is substance abuse along with training.
So this is a multifold problem, and I
So
love
come
this.
on, dip in.
I'm gonna
Come on,
dive
let's
right
do it.
in. Fuck dipping. I'm diving. Oh shoot, can I swear in your podcast? I mean, I just did.
Well,
So
And the last one I said zero fucks given. I was talking about racism and stuff. So
Okay.
there's that. So
I will try to limit my F bombs. So this becomes substance use, and this is just to give everybody like some credence as to why I'm speaking on this. That is actually a huge focus in my practice is treating substance use in individuals. So when you have this punch drunk condition, which is actually known as CTE or chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
good. I
Yeah,
hope
there we
you
go.
weren't asking me.
No, I was like, the words are hard today, man. But so CTE is the repetitive brain injuries. It causes shrinking in the brain, it causes cognitive issues, it causes a whole bunch of like brain damage type things. But in conjunction with all of this brain damage that you're experiencing, the brain atrophy and things like that, you're having memory loss. Memory loss is frustrating. You're having performance issues. Performance issues can be frustrating when you're not performing to the capacity that you think you should be, and you're experiencing some mental health symptoms around that. Well, what's the easiest way to treat that? It's to check out. It's to
Mhm.
go get high. It's not to go to therapy. It's not to put the work in to, come talk to me about how you're feeling. It's about, oh, what can I do to just get out of this thought? And there's also the flip side to that, which is I need to get amped up before a fight, or I need to get amped up. I love that feeling of being amped up, and I've now become addicted to that because
There's a
when you
type of
are
dopamine.
on, yeah,
Yeah.
you're talking about your dopamine, you're talking about your serotonin, you're talking about your endorphins, all of that rush. Your brain is like, oh, I love this. Dopamine activates the pleasure center of your brain. Serotonin is a feel good chemical, and endorphins are also feel good chemicals that you get when excitement, exercising, things like that. So your brain is just awash in this bath of like beauty and like, yes, this feels good. And if you're amping yourself up like that to train, to fight, you can actually get addicted to that chemical, that rush, and that also can lead to some substance use. That's how you end up with your substance users who are more on the upper side, the methamphetamines, the cocaine, things like that, because they're
Mm.
chasing that rush.
Okay. All right. So I
So
did
we
not know
have,
that. Go
oh
ahead.
yeah, we have the chasing that kind of adrenaline high feeling of being really up and being really amped because your body's so used to it, it starts craving it. And then you also have treating the depressive side where you just want to check out, which is usually more like your alcohol kind of things. And then we could even throw in, wait a second, what if you got injured and the doctor prescribed you some opiates for your injury because you
Mm.
needed to get back into the ring, you needed to get back into the on the mat, you needed to keep training, whatever. And then you happen to have just an addictive personality. You have that personality where you take a couple opiate based pain pills were prescribed to you because you needed them.
Hmm.
And then your body's like, "Ooh, bet. I like this. Let's do more of this." And you find yourself in an opiate addiction. So there are so many ways that you can end up with an addiction based on your exposure to martial arts and things like that.
Yeah, no, there was something going around. I know performance enhancers is always a
Hmm.
thing, especially a lot of video. We're searching for episodes. I was searching information for an episode. I ended up scrubbing it in the end because I felt like it was going to paint a particular martial system that I study on the side, and it was going to it wasn't going to do it justice. It was actually going to do more harm than good. And for those that follow the show, it's a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I moonlight in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Because I'm affiliated with a club. Well, I'm affiliated with two clubs that Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is heavily is part of their part of the school. So a lot of the videos that, of course, come across my feed, reels and stuff like that, are the ways to train well injured. I'm not a huge fan of training well injured because it's a good way to stay injured. But it did bring back researching for this particular episode with you that folks that end up using performance enhancers, and actually it really came up because I started thinking about my best mate back in the day when he was still alive, Sean Connaughton, and one him being a wrestler. And when I say wrestler, I'm referring to WWE, WWF. He was like in a minor league kind of thing like that, and even at that level, given what was out there back in the day and stuff like that. Not Sean. Sean wasn't he didn't mess with that kind of stuff, but we definitely knew people that did. That were using. I wouldn't say steroids so much, but there were other performance enhancers to help you heal faster, or just got you
Yeah.
back into the gym, or got you to be able to perform night after night for a week on an injury. You know what I'm saying? And stuff like that, which would happen a lot more often than people like well, people can imagine. And so I was thinking about that and thinking about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I was thinking about those kind of drugs and how they can be habit forming and not good best practices. And like I said, the reason why I didn't end up doing that as a centerpiece for an episode was because I felt like it was going to, that information could easily be misinterpreted and stuff like that. Again, it's my own personal preference. Israel Lopez does not train when he's injured. I try not to. It's just not a good way to, it's not a good way to be. But the object is to just not get injured.
That's it. That's how you avoid having to train when you're injured. You just don't get injured. But I'm going to back you on that too a little bit. As a medic in the military, especially one that worked at the combative school, I watched dudes train injured all the time. Like, oh, I just need to make it through this class, and I won't, judgment call on them. That's your body, your decision. But I also understand fundamentally the long-term negative effects of training while you're injured and the prolonging of the healing period. Like, yes, pain lets you know you're alive, but pain is also your body's way of saying something ain't working right here, and you probably should stop and let it, have a moment to fix itself. So,
Definitely. All right, so not so much as switching gears, and I don't know how to classify this topic, and maybe you could help me out with this.
no
So,
pressure.
without being sexist, and because well, I didn't realize how much, and it's not a woke thing, man. It's a being aware of how much misogyny is in the day to day.
Okay.
Like okay, um, and for those, I'm gonna dumb it down by saying like how much man stuff and is in the way we speak or just and in this particular case, I want to talk about when we talk about mental health, and we're talking about women who've been victimized, who've dealt with being going from being a victim, and this comes up because I still lecture occasionally. Haven't done it in a little while, at least 6 months. But a self protection, self defense program. But it's really where I spend more time talking about the preventive maintenance, the things that wouldn't put. Because I always say that I feel like that's always been marketed wrong. Um, and this isn't originally mine. This is something I got from Haskins, and so I always give him credit when credit is due. Is self protection is living your life in such a way where violence misses you.
Yep.
Okay, self defense is the intervention, and they typically get coupled as a same thing and marketed the same way. So you'd say, "Well, I'm teaching a woman self defense workshop, and it's a bunch of physical things." And what we found over years and years of study is that the average woman doesn't have that much time. And if you go back and say, "Hey, what'd you remember from RAD or what'd you remember from this program?" A lot of times they're nothing, gone. Or you grab them and they freeze up real quick because of course you've never dealt with the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so what we found is the preventative stuff, the lecture, the stuff I can talk to you about. Hey man, put your purse in the back of your car when you walk to your car. Why? Because it's going to make you look in the back seat of your car. Don't, when you're transitioning between safe spaces to open spaces, don't look at your damn phone. Pay attention. Like
Yeah, have some situational
yeah, awareness.
awareness.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
those things. And then if you went back and asked those women years later, they could regurgitate that information. They oh yeah, yeah, I don't sit with my back to a door, or I pay attention who walks in
Mhm.
and stuff like that. Like, and you're like, hey, all right, and you start applauding. So I don't know what to classify that in when we say, because again, I mean, men get assaulted too. You know what I'm saying? Just I feel like statistically more women do than men, but I don't know. I don't have that statistic right in front of me, and it's been changing. So, what
Right.
how do we talk about that kind of mental health that a woman goes through in general, especially like those that were in uh shit, I don't even know how to say it right, man. Uh nudie bars. All right, guys, or
So, where are we talking about like sex workers who are working as professionals in adult entertainment venues like strip clubs?
yeah, that and just in general, because though there's a believe it or not, there's a high percentage of those that train. Like back in Massachusetts, I had 4 or 5 students that were from that line of work. But
Absolutely. Well, why
so
wouldn't you if you're anytime that we're talking about sex workers, and you're just hitting all of my buttons tonight. I just need you to know that like all the things that I love and I'm passionate about. Um, So, sex workers, when you're talking about that, you're talking about a classification of, and while sex workers are do encompass a bunch of different positions and things like that, and a bunch of different genders, for this conversation, very specifically, just going to focus on female sex workers. They're constantly putting themselves in a position to be vulnerable and exposed to men, whether it be strip clubs or escort services, things like that. And men generally, and every woman can come for me for this comment, it's fine. I'm just going to be honest with it, are generally built bigger than females.
mhm. Yeah, no,
More
there's truth
muscle
to that. Yeah.
tone,
Hmm.
different skeletal build. There's genetics are a thing, and no matter how much we want to like argue about it, genetics are still a thing.
Oh yeah.
So you're taking people who are often smaller and probably with less muscle tone and putting them in situations where they are potentially going to be victimized by people who are significantly bigger than them or are in positions to cause great harm, whether it be sexual assault or things like that. So it's not even remotely surprising that they're going out and training in martial arts in a sense to give themselves just even a sense of I may not be able to prevent 100%, all attacks or things like that, but I can at least defend myself
Hmm.
and having a little bit of confidence in their own ability to survive.
Yeah, no, I'm digging that. Yeah, I'd always, like I said, I always struggle with trying to get past. I think, oh, and I don't want to say her name, but we were really tight at one point, and she's doing like she left the industry, got her degree. Actually, it was one of the weird. It was like the cliche. I'm only doing this to pay my way through school.
Yeah, tell me
Like,
more about that. Yeah, no.
yeah, but apparently she did. That's what she did.
It's a
Uh,
thing.
yeah,
School's expensive.
yes. She had no student debt, and we recently connected right before I moved down to South Carolina then and stuff, and because she was headed back to Mass and said, "Hey, do you mind if I pop in the dojo?" And I was like, "Ah, well, if I'm not there, Aaron's there," and he's like, he'll remember you, you'll be okay, and stuff like that. But she was telling me how she a lot of the things that she thought were perishable because of the way she trained. A lot of things came back to her, and that she still carries a lot of trauma. I guess she came to me after an event, an unfortunate event took place in her life, and sometimes it's the one you know what I'm saying, and not the stranger with the hoodie on. You know what I'm saying, and stuff like that. And it was an unfortunate thing, and at the time I didn't have the tools mentally or the education to help in that department. Like all I could give you was the physical. I couldn't help you live with it, and stuff. And I didn't have the insight that I have now about telling folks, hey man, sometimes you need to go see somebody. You need to go have a conversation. You need to go see it there. I swear by therapy for mental health now. Like, well, I wasn't always that way.
I know.
I came from that old school. What? There's something wrong with you?
Right leg. Oh, why you a pussy?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
well, you
right, right.
can't you can't fix yourself.
Yeah, you can't
You
toughen up. Come on,
it's
stop it
shit.
now. I'm like,
Absolutely.
my family, we went through that too, and
Yeah,
that was the mindset. And now I'm like, well, you know what? I mean, if it keeps somebody from going out there and well, executing a ton of people, because they done
yeah.
snapped. Well, yeah, well, go see that therapist. I'm like, here's my card. Go tell Missy sent you. I'm like, go ahead, right? Because again, and I know I sound like a broken horse when I bring it up, but we
Broken horse.
uh, yeah, did I say that right? A broken record.
There. Okay.
There we go. Yeah, a broken record when I say it. We don't put a high level of seriousness on violence and the way we should, especially in the martial arts. And again, and I really do, I'm coming to the way of thinking. It's more so because we think of it always as sport. Majority of the martial arts community, even those in the traditional karate realm, don't think of it as killing somebody. They don't take it with the same seriousness that one does when you learn to use a firearm. And the reason we don't point a firearm, loaded or not, in front of someone is because we always consider them to be loaded. There's a seriousness that comes with this, right?
Right.
I guess in some ways, if we did, no one would send their kids to classes, I
Yeah,
guess.
you're to turn little Johnny into a killing machine. Maybe he doesn't need to go to jujitsu this week.
Yeah, he gonna
Yeah,
go to
right.
art
How does
class
ballet
instead.
sound?
Yeah, you
But
hey, Mikhail Baryshnikov was a serious martial artist.
look, muscle tone is muscle tone, you know. But
Hmm.
and I think you're right. In it, even if we take away the training to kill component of martial arts, even in matches, you're exposed to violence. Whether it's, healthy, friendly, competitive violence or, just more aggressive violence, it's still violence and it's still a form of trauma. You're still exposing yourself to trauma and your body's going to imprint it. It's going to internalize it. And you need to go talk to somebody about that because you can't take in all of this shit and not have somewhere for it to go eventually. Like,
Oh, exactly.
PTSD is a huge thing in the martial arts community because you're consistently and repeatedly exposed to high levels of violence, whether competitive or, because you're getting into altercations on the street, because maybe you're more likely to intervene if you see something happening because oh, I just saw grandma's purse get snatched by this guy. I know I can get it back. You're still putting yourself in situations where you're exposed to violence. So,
Well, yeah, yeah. Look, there have been many folks that intervene with a high level of training. Even the dude, he was cleared in New York City, for the murder of, well, not I guess not murder, involuntary
thank you.
manslaughter, but he
Words
was
are
found
important.
not guilty. Yeah, well, because it was an and it was a chokehold, right? And it made the major news, and everybody talked about it. And I said, I remember talking with Barack about it, and I said, he's going to be found not guilty. No, 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 because he shouldn't have intervened, and he had a heightened level of training. And I said, look, man, I get it. You were in a rear naked choke, and I'm on my back, and you're on top of me, and everybody's screaming and all this stuff. I got tunnel
Yeah.
vision. I'm not listening to everybody else, and I'm gonna hold this. And he held it too long, and look, and he ended up killing a man. Now he has to reconcile the rest of his life where he killed a man, and I'm quite sure that this individual has spent a good deal of his time Monday night quarterbacking that decision to get
Absolutely.
involved. Now, I'm quite like he was military trained, and look, and martial artists have done that all the time. Where I've done it in my real life, where I saw something happening and hey, back up, man, and got involved in a fight. Hell, actually, that's how we met. I'm gonna go throw their names out there. No one needs to know who they really are, but that's how we met Heidi and
Yeah.
Jason.
I forgot about that. That's how you intervening into yeah.
That's how I met them anyway. And I was like, oh no, we about to do it. Like, not thinking at the time that could have went hella wrong really fast. I mean, I was already
Yeah.
at
I
that
mean,
level myself, but so I might have been in jail.
and it absolutely, and there's something to, once you're trained to no longer avoid violence, you end up in all these weird situations where you're putting yourself into situations that are potentially traumatizing and deadly for you. I mean, I work because I have like 17 jobs. I also work security on Bourbon Street. I'm in New Orleans, clearly, and
Well, did you see the
not
shirt?
so yeah. Right, I saw that. I was like, throwback to my land, but. I work security, and I recently found myself in a situation where a group of bikers kind of stormed our door trying to get to the people that we had at a private event because they were throwing things off the balcony at them and taunting them. And like, they were, why don't you come up here? And these bikers who were armed and angry were like, well, don't mind if I do. ran over my manager, ran over another security guard, and I, without even thinking about, oh shit, this is how I die, like ran to the threat because I'm trained to run to the threat.
Yeah.
And so that in and of itself, like, and I say all of that to say, after that happened, I had to process what had occurred because I had to sit there and say, oh crap, like I have all this mental health training, like I have a private practice that I run, I do all this stuff, and I just damn near threw all of that away running towards a threat that I didn't need to run towards. And so that in and of itself is some mental health stuff you got to process, right? So say all of that to say it's the idea of once you are trained to that level, it's hard to undo that training. And then you have to work through the consequences. Like you have to process the consequences of those choices that you make. Hey, I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Shannon.
And together
we are Shrinking Heads,
two mental health providers here to help you explore the jungle of mental health.
We invite you to join our bi-weekly podcast
where we explore everything from how to find a therapist to how to break up with your therapist.
And we're going to use humor to hack through the jungle because humor is self-care too.
So we encourage you to join us and download our podcast anywhere you get your podcast. iHeartRadio, CastBox, Spotify, all of those major places. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Shannon.
And together
we are Shrinking Heads.
Well, so the one saving grace, if you do come from a traditional background, is that you have the honor, the morale, the tenets of Bushido, depending on what system or martial system. If you're, a lot of times there's a degree of spirituality that comes from the more traditional arts. Unfortunately, in the more sports realm of like MMA, BJJ, well, I've even seen it in sport judo too, which is pretty sad because it's judo, right? And for those that don't know, for your listeners, judo, the founder of judo was all about making better people. There's a saying in judo called jutekye, and it's mutual benefit and well-being, right?
Yep.
It means mutual benefit. I like saying you and I shine together, right? And this whole like the juko no kinsei, if I'm saying that correctly, is perfection of one's character. And so the founder of judo was really about just making really good people, and it made sense because he's around World War II and all the craziness, and he was Japanese, and that whole thing, right? So he probably saw a lot of things that he was like, oh man, really, we doing this? Why?
Like, we don't need to do this.
Yeah, we don't, And but he was also an ambassador. He went about the world, brought judo all over the world and stuff like that. So again, I think to see what we're seeing now, where folks are losing the moral compass in my industry, it's sad. Especially when I take it a little more to the Kulo because I chose out of all the martial systems that I have training under, judo is the one I have the lowest rank in, but that was the art that I wanted to teach for the rest of my life. That I absolutely fell in love with the overall concept that Professor Jigoro Kano was trying to throw out to the world. And in no martial system that I've ever studied ever really brought that part home. Like there was kind of their own thing. So my Okinawan background, which is Shorin-ryu, I hold a sixth. I also hold a Yodan in Taiho Jitsu, and then I have a third degree in judo, and it's just I've dabbled in other things. I wrestled in high school and all that other good stuff. So I guess I've been all about the fighting thing. I learned how to box, but I was never a boxer. I never got into, like, I've done sparring sessions with people, but I've never actually gotten to the ring, like Golden Gloves and stuff like that. So there's times where you hear me, if you're listening to the show, you hear me talk about these things, but understand that some of these things were experiences that I wanted to experience. Kind of like the whole cage fighting thing was more like, it was only a handful of times, and it was really just somebody told me I wouldn't do it. And then we had to go all over the damn place because at the time you couldn't get anything sanctioned in New England and stuff like that. So you were all over the damn country, right? And then it was dangerous because some of that stuff wasn't sanctioned at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw more people getting hurt than it. But what I will say is This is when you had to fight 3 or 4 times in a night and stuff like that. It wasn't like one of those things where it was still tournament style, which I thought was one of the things that left like when UFC started really changing the game where you only fought once and stuff like that. You had to have enough in the tank and stuff, and it was a different kind of fighter. And I guess I was really violent back then, though, too. Barack and I, we talk about this every now and again, especially off camera. I will tell anybody in a heartbeat. In my 20s, I was a villain. I was not a hero.
Mm.
Like I was a villain. And thankfully, I had a lot of people that were looking out for me, because I definitely wasn't looking out for myself. So it was one of those things.
Well, that's your 20s are not the time where, we're known for making really good decisions, that the prefrontal cortex, the impulse control, decision-making part of your brain doesn't really come online and start firing until you're like 25.
Hmm.
And then you want to add in all of this aggression that you had to have to be in the fight in a cage fighter, even if it's a handful of matches. If you're fighting multiple matches at the same time, you're just kind of flooding your body with these chemicals, and that's a lot. And that's the idea of multiple matches. Like as a medic, just like former medic me cringes at that. And I didn't love it like when they had to do multiple iterations of like the clinch drill, or like multiple iterations in the ring for MMA or for modern army combatives, like because you're consistently just getting bashed in the head, and whether or not you get a concussion isn't necessarily the case, but you're getting knocked around. And if you're going through multiple rounds, the likelihood of you having some significant brain damage gets much larger. I mean, I've seen guys knocked out, just sprawled out on the mat, and then like, come on, man, get back at like,
Yeah,
you got another
yeah.
match. Like, no, man, you don't have another match. You have a head injury, is what you have. Like, I'm
Well,
gonna,
I mean, that's even in judo. That's why they have us take the concussion training now, and so even as instructors, that when somebody gets a head injury, we don't chance it. We don't say, okay, well, go sit it off, and then no, you're done. You're done for
yeah.
today.
I mean,
And
you should, as you should be.
yeah,
Uh,
man, I'm like it's like I said, our industry is unique by way of it's not really regulated in a lot of ways. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a huge fan of regulation in my real life, right? Per your
no, but
last episode, do you talk politics and therapy?
yeah.
That was a great episode, man. Great episode. And I found myself talking to both of you as I was editing. But
I,
it even sparked me calling. I think I did. Yeah, I called you.
yeah.
And
We had a
so,
whole
yeah,
conversation
whole
about politics
conversation
and
about
therapy sessions.
politics and
So
therapy session. Um, Simply because of just that, man. I'm like, yeah, man. That's my train of thought.
we were, yeah, let me hold on, let me get you back on track here. I'll fill that role today, talking about regulations and just martial arts being, not
Mm.
overly regulated, which leaves a lot of space for, I think, I'm just going to assume the point you're making, so you can correct me if I'm
No,
wrong,
no, please,
but
please.
that the knowing you like I do, that leaves a lot of gray area for people to end up in these situations where they're, potentially getting injured or having injuries that become even more injured because it's not regulated. You got people going back in, and then just like a general lack of awareness of what an injury should look like
Yeah.
that lack of consistent training across the board. What is concussion training? When do you need to pull someone out? How do you assess for a concussion? What are you looking for symptom wise? Things like that. Um,
Well, I wanted to add one. Yes, so yes, you're right on the money, and I also want to add again what sparked this particular episode and wanting to do it is when are you getting as a coach, as a trainer, when I start to see a fighter start getting just too aggressive, just we're just starting to get that what was it? We used to love it back in the day though. We had craved it. You had the eye of the tiger, that killer instinct.
mhm.
And you were just gonna be a monster, and you gonna eat them. And they said, "Yeah," until he beat his wife half to death,
Right.
or beat up his kids, or went home and shot the whole family. You know what I'm saying? Then it's like, "What if I only knew?" You did know. You saw it the whole time.
You fostered it. You grew it. You developed it.
Yeah, there were
Don't
folks. There was a and I don't have the complete amount of facts, so I'm going to speak about this, but keep this in mind, ladies and gentlemen. I do not have all the facts. You can look this up. So there was a wrestler by the name of Chris Benoit who he ended up he had a good career and he was a great man all the way up until he killed his family. At that point, he stopped being a great man. Um, and he had mental health issues.
Yep.
And when you're listening to other wrestlers or other folks that knew him that would reflect, in hindsight, I guess I get it, all the textbook signs were there. Like really, they really were. Like he'd be there in the conversation or he'd get really angry. Some people would say, and it's not things that people are just making up now, whatever, to kind of make themselves relevant. But you're listening to all of this. And then I start thinking back, I knew guys like that at the gym. Now, they didn't go off and kill their wives and kids, but they kind of went off the deep end, and we start thinking to ourselves, especially I say this especially now because I'm a coach. It, yeah, I want you to win. I want you to go out there and be the best person you can be. But I also feel like we have it, especially if you're going to walk around, and it's not so much, I guess coaches in a way can kind of skirt this because, yeah, we're supposed to kind of see it, but coaching and being a teacher are two different things. You can coach a fighter to become a champion. You can do that. But to teach someone something is completely different. So when we use the title sensei, or I know somebody say one who comes before and stuff like that, what I'm really saying is I'm a teacher. I'm not just a coach. With the United States Judo Association, and as far as USA Judo is concerned, I'm a coach. But I was given my Minkyo Kaiten, my teaching license in Shunryu, right? Which is kind of weird because Minko Kaiten is Japanese. But we can get to that another time. But the point I'm making is I have not just the bare, like a coach, like I said, I can skirt it, but as a teacher, I'm paying attention. I have to pay attention to those red flags because those red flags are the difference between me bringing somebody telling some parent or some other person, hey man, I'm so sorry if we only knew, but I did know.
And that's imagine how much different martial arts would be if there was some basic overall training about what are you looking for? What are some signs that a person has CTE or is punch drunk? That what are early warning signs that there's a head injury? When do you pull somebody? How do you have this conversation? Because I think that's the other problem is that it can be really hard to have hard conversations with people, right? So how do you have a conversation with this dude that you've been training and teaching, whatever vernacular we want to use, whatever the role is, to be this fighter, and then you have to say, hey, homie, you went too far. Like, I'm
Yeah.
worried now. Like, I know I just spent years telling you to be aggressive, but now I think you're too aggressive. And like, how do you have that conversation with people? So I think that imagine a little bit of, and I'm with you. I'm not necessarily a big fan of regulation. I'm generally live my life. I will ask for forgiveness, not for permission.
Yeah.
Anyone who's known me for 12, I have knuckle tattoos as a therapist, which is apparently very polarizing lately. But I march to the beat of my own drum.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but just a little bit of oversight. Just imagine how different this conversation could be
Well,
if
yes.
there was some overall like regulation or training on the mental health aspects of what happens with mental health, like, with exposure to violence and things like that.
Well, yeah, I'd say that we've gone places where we were now looking for pedophiles. We're now paying attention to grooming. We're now paying attention to head injuries and things like that. But again, what we're not paying attention to, it is something that we keep neglecting or keep missing is what we're talking about today, and that's I don't even know how to really put it in words. It's being able to deal with ourselves committing acts of violence because it's violent. We are doing really,
Yeah.
we have heinous, malicious intent, man or
You're not
woman.
going out there because, like, let's have a tickle fight. Like,
Yeah,
you're
that'd
not
be
showing up to a
hilarious.
match saying, like, ooh, we're just going to roll around a little bit and then everybody's going to get ice cream sundaes. You're going to a match with the intent to cause harm to another person, whether it be, just like pinning and submission kind of stuff, or if it's actual like physical broken bones, head injuries, things like that. You're still showing up with the intent of how do I be more physically aggressive than the person that I am competing against or the person that I'm up against. And
Yeah.
that it absolutely takes a toll. It stacks up and it becomes the regular for you. Like once you figure out what aggression is, you're like, oh, I'm at this level. And then that level becomes more like your baseline. And then you get to the next level, and that becomes more like your baseline, your homeostasis. Like when we talk about mental health and we talk about like whole body, holistic kind of mental health approaches, we're looking at the body in the level of homeostasis, where you're in balance. Your physical health is good, your mental health is good, everything's kind of in balance. And that's your normal default level. That's where your body and your mind go to. Like left unattended, homeostasis is your balance and where it goes. But if you're building aggression all the time, you're moving that bar. Your homeostasis that might have been down here to start is now like here. And that's just Tuesday. That's not you going to a match. That's not you being competitive. So it really is that whole conversation about like, how do we find that balance?
Yeah, I'm digging that. So what's coming up next for Shrinkheads podcast? So your partner in crime, because we're coming close to time. I know
Yeah.
you got to go, and if it was up to me, we'd be talking for hours. Because I always enjoy having a conversation. Palathers, I do miss you guys. I got to get down there. I'm supposed to be down there filming soon, but I don't know if that's going to materialize or not. We're kind of behind in episodes for the actual. Modern combative series and stuff
Mhm.
like that. So I got to get up to New York City and get something done up there. But so what's going on with your partner in crime? What's up?
Hopefully her stuff is sorted in the next couple of weeks and that she comes back. Provided that Shannon is back and I'm not bringing in another guest host, we're going to be doing a little bit of conversation about types of therapy, the modalities that people use. Before Shannon left Shrinking Heads, before she took her little hiatus, went on her sabbatical, we had done an episode on like what do the letters after your provider's name mean. Now we're the goal and the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, Izzy, are to do an episode on what are the treatment letters of your like what do they mean like EMDR, MI, CBT, DBT, stuff like that. And just as a quick tie-in, CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, are actually super great for treating PTSD and some of this. Like I use them a lot, tools from them when working with individuals who have a lot of violence exposure,
Oh,
whether as a
nice.
victim or as more,
Oh yeah, yeah.
a
So I'm like, all right.
perpetrator.
So yeah, she's got to come back. So because I'm like, this episode gonna drop, and it would just be nice to kind of have a follow up.
I look,
You know, because
I'm trying. I will try to drag her back from her sabbatical. But that theoretically, that's what's coming up next.
yeah. So on the maze, all we have is I have a rant coming up where it's just me really complaining about something. Well, no, because you got to throw the rants in. Well, because we have the Root to the Truth episodes, which is Barakulat Shidoshi. Those are standalone, and it's really his. It's not even his. It's a factual based accounting of things that we see in the martial universe, and kind of correcting fallacies or sometimes
Yeah.
the best practices that will. Oh, it's this, and he kind of gets into no, it's boom, boom, and this is what you should be trying to achieve. Well, I love those. I always look forward to those because he's the man in that department. He really is. Um, I'm more of a, I live by life experiences kind of guy where he's like, well, yeah, we can do that but we can also be knowledgeable on
We
top
can
of
look at the
that too.
facts of the thing and not just how you interpreted
I'm
it.
like,
Yeah.
what, you mean we can't fly, Barack? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, he's like,
I
yes,
think so.
if we get in a plane,
Yeah.
imagine what he has to go through dealing with me off camera.
As someone who deals with you off camera, I absolutely can empathize.
Oh yeah,
But
no,
I feel like you're just more ridiculous with him.
yeah, well, yeah, because it's my cousin, man. He knew me since we were little kids, so yeah. Oh no, but he's always good with reeling me in. Now this is and then we have a Paths Through the Maze, which is kind of our teaser for Modern Combatives. Excuse me, did I say that right? So yeah, Root to the Truth and then Paths. So Paths Through the Maze is a physical or a visual representation of a rant, maybe like something I was saying. Like, so I have one where that's coming up, and it's really about something I see that judoka do without clarifying that this is because of the sport of judo. This is why I'm going to throw this way, and the guy can land on top of me after I've thrown him because I've got the score and I've won the match. And a lot of times, because they don't clarify that, it's misinterpreted. Well, judo's not effective because he threw the guy so hard that the other guy landed on top of him. How would that work? So it's really me showing the two sides of this. This is the sport, and this is what it looks like in real life. But the episode that's coming up next for the podcast is a rant that ties into high-level judoka are teaching really low-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys high-level throws. And when we say high-level, what I want folks to understand, it's just a higher level of understanding of a basic concept. And it leads to it working sometimes Tuesday after 12, but it becomes dangerous to the person you're actually throwing because they don't know how to receive. They have never been thrown that way before. Where when we do it in judo, it's all the levels are set up in such a way when Kano devised the system, because he was an educator, where it's really by your degree of difficulty to get thrown on, believe it or not. Folks are like, well, what do you mean? And Diashi I believe the reason why you teach it as the first throw to be taught in most judo schools is because it's the easiest one to fall from, like to be taken and put on your back. It doesn't hurt. And it gives you time to acclimate yourself to being thrown and falling and getting back up and all that other good stuff. So,
I'm sorry. Are we talking about building up that pattern of behavior and reaching a level of norm?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That part.
Yeah, okay.
So,
just checking.
yeah, so it's really about that, and that it's. I get it where the argument is always made where, well, it works. Yeah, it does. You throw somebody, it works great, but until you try it on somebody who's actually trained and it don't work so well anymore. Or more importantly, until you hurt somebody. It's one of the throws I watched recently was somebody doing an uchimata. It's an inner thigh throw. And they threw somebody who didn't know how to receive the throw. Well, when he threw him, he hyperextended and pulled the guy's groin muscle in the process. So it was unintentional. He wasn't trying to hurt the guy with the throw, but he ends up putting other guys out 6 months. He's out of practice 6 months, on a groin injury.
What does that do to his mental health? What does that do to his? I'm going to tie it all back to mental health.
Yes.
But I think, and so that's really interesting. I love this, and I cannot wait to hear this. There's a concept in mental health treatment, which is usually it started sort of with like substance use treatment, and the HIV movement, which was harm reduction. And basically, this is the idea of looking at things from a lens of how do you assess a situation and make changes so that that situation is done with the least amount of harm. So it may be like, I usually, when I teach this to people, I teach it with the example of like, okay, great. You may be smoking a bunch of weed, but the alternative was before you started smoking a bunch of weed, you were shooting a bunch of heroin. So like harm reduction is, okay, yeah, we don't love that you're smoking a bunch of weed, but it's a reduction of harm from where you were at when you were doing heroin. And I think that it'd be really cool to look at this whole concept of we're teaching these advanced throws, but are we doing it from a harm reduction lens? Are we looking at like, how do we teach this with creating the least amount of harm for the people like who are not prepared to receive the throw and things like that? And how do you incorporate harm reduction into that?
Oh, there is. Teach the first damn kill. teach advanced version. Like, yeah.
Right now,
Like,
okay, my bad.
so yeah, Kano Sensei had already thought that one through. He said, look, you need to learn these first, and then you learn these. You know what I mean? Because this is your foundation. This is going to help, and it's from Uki's perspective. This is the foundation. Boom, and now you can get to these higher level throws because all they are is advanced concepts of beginning throws and stuff. But by then you've hit the ground so many times you're no longer worried. It happens, your body just goes and you're good. Anyway.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so that's going to be a rant. That's what's
Okay.
coming on next. Yeah, man, like I said, it was a blast being on your show. It was definitely we're going to have you back on the maze because
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. Like, this was great.
so we'd like to thank you for listening to the Marshall Maze. I'm Israel Lopez Sensei. I'm without my partner in crime, Barack and Shidoshi. We want to thank our special guest, Elizabeth. Look, Shrunken Heads Podcast, baby. That's where it's at. And you've been listening to the Marshall Maze.
Go forth and slay.